Good morning, everyone. On this beautiful Saturday, we have Rahul Gonzalez and Monica Pillai from Obvious. And whatever I have seen about the team, I've gone through all of your pages also, by the way. Everything that I have seen on the website, and I'm not even incorporating the work and the products and the companies, the amazing work that you have done, but just the site altogether and everything that shouts out of that, about the team culture is anything but obvious. And that has been the most delightful part, to be surprised. And we talk to teams day in and day out about workplace culture, building inclusive teams, setting up the right policies, and to come across even the team page. I even tweeted about it, Rahul, saying that the most beautiful team page that I have ever seen, and for various reasons, not just because I see there's such diversity which is so visible there on the team, but even the smallest things make so much difference, right? I usually on a team page we will see that it starts with founders and CEOs and CTOs and CEOs, and then it flows in a hierarchy. Somewhere I found you, Rahul, there. It says somewhere in the middle of the boxes, right? And it was such a beautiful thing to see, because what is visible is what created an immediate impact for us also. Not just me as a person, but for the whole of team at Ungender. This was such a delight to see. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank Monica for coming here, joining me for this conversation wherein we go and dig how did Obvious happen as a beautiful team that it is today.
Thank you, Pallavi, for that. That's a very kind introduction, and I think the team page is just a manifestation of the happy reality that we find ourselves in. Though I think that our story actually, when we started out, was very, very different. And for me, that's the interesting thing. I mean, at a very personal level, that's what's been most interesting. That we didn't start out like this at all, right? The three of us who started Obvious are the opposite of diverse. We are three men, all within, I think we're within like a year or two of each other in terms of age, in sort of our socioeconomic backgrounds, the things that we enjoy, the things that we do, even the small things like the movies that we watched, or so on and so forth, right? And for our first few years, we've now been around in one shape or form for about 8 or 9 years. And for our first few years, we continued to look very similar, right? We had we accumulated people who looked very similar to us, who thought like us, and everything was fine in some respect, right? We all, right, for some reason, we all ended up hanging out and sharing the same interests, and not having the same responsibilities, etc., etc. And it's been quite a journey, right? And Monica, I can't remember when it was that we noticed it, but I think sometime earlier, maybe a month or two ago, because we've continued to build the team. We've had some people join us, not necessarily even in the same space, but in different cities around India or different towns around India. And I think I can't remember whether it was Monica who brought this to my notice. She's like, "Hey, listen, we now have more women on the team than men, right? as on date." And I was like, "Oh, that's really interesting," because that has been one of our explicit goals that we set ourselves a couple of years ago, to say, okay, how why does our organization not look more representative of the larger world in which we exist? Because we keep talking about building products that are going to be used by the entire country, world, whatever it is. But how can you really do that if you don't have the perspectives and people inside who represent that larger world, right? That's been part of our thinking. And I think that we are now on track to perhaps being, at least that one small axis of diversity, right? Diversity, there's so many different axes that you can look at it, right? There's class, there's caste, there's gender is one part, there's ability, there's so many different ways and far more nuanced ways that we need to engage with it. This is really for me just a starting point, and I hope that I'm sure that I'm not sure, but I hope to be able to go deeper in that examination over the years.
Yeah, hope is a key word here, because as long as that aspiration, that intent is there, we always tell our partner companies or individuals that we talk to. And by the way, at Ungender we measure diversity around 25 metrics, right? So that's how deep we have gone into it. But that's what we always tell, that if you have the intent, don't worry about the rest of the part, right? So the hope is the important ingredient here. I'm going to ask you, Monica, how has it been? I mean, when did you join, and how has the culture of the organization evolved? And what are the, even though I see that fundamentally things have to be there at the core level, otherwise they will never sprout up, right? You cannot just come and introduce an external thing and expect it to work. So somewhere maybe it was there even when you joined, and it was just waiting to be discovered or uncovered. How has been your journey with Obvious so far?
Sure. So I'm going to pick up where you left off with intent, which is that. I came in about 10 odd months ago, and one of the first things that I got involved with was hiring. And the thing that I heard was, we're not going to look for people who are similar to the people that we've currently got, and and exactly what Rahul said, right? That maybe let's look at as much diversity as we can in the next set of people that are coming in, and do that really consciously. And and the hiring was needed on fairly immediate footing. But I think so. For me, what's spectacular, and I'm coming close to about 20 years of doing this, right? But for me, what's spectacular is for people who run the business, who are responsible for the bottom line, to say, I'm okay to lose business, but I'm not okay to give up on what we said we ought to do, which is that, so we can't say that let's defer. So I asked, do you want to defer this whole plan by a couple of months, and the next set of hirings? No, we'll wait. It's okay. So, it's fine if we have to wait to get the right set of people in, but we are putting a set of open positions for folks who are not so far represented. And so we went exploring a fair bit. We said, are there spaces where we can go and look for folks from the LGBTQ community? Are there, and so we did that, and we said maybe one of the early spaces that we can definitely look at and get people are to make sure that we get women in for these specific roles. And I was told that, we're locking these roles in for women. Only if we don't have any women after a large number of months, then we will talk about it.
That's a big call to take as a team, right? Yep. Because nobody waits for the right, designated diversity to come in, and it's usually the business mandate that is governing how fast you should be completing a certain process. That has been a challenge. That must have been pretty challenging internally, because how do you prioritize diversity over the other business needs is a tough call to take. Any dilemma that happened that you struggled out of?
So it was really funny, right? So I kept going back and asking. We were fairly sure that there is some problem that people aren't talking about. So, I had this conversation with Pratul, one of the other co-founders for whose team we were hiring. And it was a one sentence, no, we will wait for the right set of people. And that was that. So I said, maybe the team's under pressure, right? So then I checked in with them, and they said, we will wait for the right set of people. And that was it. And the funny thing is, by the time that we took to get the right set of people, and genuinely, saying, let's put them through the same process that we put anybody else through, and then evaluate and make sure that they're the right cultural fit for us, took the same amount of time. And within whatever the timelines were, we had people on board. Everything was smooth. So it's just that I think I kept waiting for there to be some stress, some struggle. There wasn't any. It was amazing. So yeah.
Because that's the cycle that usually happens, right? We identify certain things as priority, and especially when it comes to diversity and inclusion, right? Agendas are set, and we set objectives, but when it comes to the execution side of things, it is a very tedious and a very painful process. And I'm not even talking about the cost, because as a country and as an industry, of course, globally there are lots of reports available for the cost that you pay for not being diverse, or the cost that you pay for waiting to be diverse, and other associated costs. But in India, we so far have not done that. And majority leadership in Indian context waits for that data driven proof to come in. That prove it to us that we will end up paying something, or we will not end up growing that much if we are not diverse. Was that ever a challenge, or is this something that is driven more by internally collected data at your end as a team? And this is a question I'm throwing to both of you, Rahul and Monica both. Is this something that you have already internally identified a data for your own self, be it terms of growth, be it terms of profit, be it terms of some value that you have assigned to the internal team quotient and well-being? Or is this something that is purely driven out of intent, that we don't even care what the numbers could be, but this is what it is? How are the decisions taken?
Monica, should I go?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I think it's a number of different factors, right? I think that one is a genuine belief that we will not be able to do the best work that we can if we don't have a team that is able to bring in a diversity of thought and lived experiences, right? If we all, in India, if you are a, male between, a certain set of ages, come from a certain socioeconomic background, your lived experience is very disconnected from a huge portion of this country.
True.
Right? So how do you actually genuinely build something? When you're building a product that, and all the products that we build go out to what we call country scale, right? They go to hundreds of millions of people in many cases. So how do you genuinely build something and have not just an empathy, because perhaps empathy can be, you can build empathy, but how do you viscerally understand the lived experience of somebody whose life is so different from your own?
Right.
And so while I may not be able to quantify it and say, hey, we are going to be less successful as a business by 18% because we don't have this particular kind of representation or whatnot. I think there's a certain intuition. I think also that we're not necessarily at a scale where we need to wait too long for a data-driven process to say, hey, let's make this a primary objective. So that helps, right? I think that I acknowledge that the space that we have to be able to say, hey, this is priority, this is priority above a number of others. Not all organizations will have that space, right? But so I think that a lot of the things that we talk about should also be viewed in the context of maybe everybody's journey of getting to be the organization that they want to will look different, right? I cannot claim to speak for a Wipro with I don't know how many thousand people and say that, hey, you need to keep this as your top priority and do this tomorrow, right?
No, that's true.
But I think that at the same time, in fact, I hope that over this session, we can actually share some of the actionable things that we've done at various stages of our company, or at various different pieces, right? Right from how do you create a welcoming and safe environment to perhaps how do we look at hiring, to how do we look at growth and progression, right? Because those sort of form a very connected loop that we need to, and you need to address all those different pieces.
No, absolutely. And we will be getting into those actionables because that's what is missing for a lot of teams, right? And we're not even talking about the institution level. And thank you for crossing that out right now, only because we have to look at apples and oranges, right? Every team, every industry,
Yeah.
every entity has its own persona, and
Yeah.
you have to give it what it needs with the
Absolutely.
composition that it is made of. And
Yeah.
you do put yourself in the category of a product company, a tech product company, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So a lot of other similar entities should be able to take a lot of takeaways from today's conversation.
Absolutely.
What is it that we can do? And that's what we want to capture. Monica, any thoughts on the question that I asked before I go more on the specifics?
Sure. So, yeah, so I think what Rahul said on the idea that, intent and start with there, and I've heard that being spoken about multiple times across different kinds of conversations, but also how it comes across slightly more downriver is once people join in, right? So something that somebody said to me recently, and this person has been around for a couple of months, and they said, um, the thing and then this person joined pretty much after the whole pandemic started. So they joined remotely, they got onboarded remotely. They've just met us during, the interview, and response from them, which really got me thinking, was that they said, I've noticed that everybody in the organization tends to speak from a space of their own experience. So they put in context whatever they're talking about. I've never heard anybody talk about anything in terms of absolutes or universal sort of realities. So everybody is very aware of, I might be saying this with great conviction, but I'm aware of the fact that this is my experience. And she said, I didn't realize that it was this important. I never expected to find that in an organization. So,
Right.
and only when that got said, only when I heard it through somebody's experience, I realized that's actually really true. And I think that's one of the things that comes out of that intent being internalized, that, that uh, there is uh, there is this idea that whatever and pick, the kind of difference. So, what kind of uh, education background, how storied the organization that they've worked in before, or the education institutes that they come from before, or whatever. There is a sense that everybody brings to the table that this is, at the end of the day, what I'm thinking, and and therefore respect for whatever else you're saying. I think that's how it shows up on a daily basis at work.
No, absolutely. I mean, as much as there is value for the policies and processes that you put, until and unless it is felt, and it is experienced by in the team altogether, and not just one or two people, but it is felt and experienced by the team, those documents actually do not mean anything, right? You need them because they are the backbone for anybody to go back to, and those are the words written in stone, in the form of words written on paper that you can adhere to, but they are meaningless and valueless if they are not manifesting in the culture. And this one statement, I mean, can completely relate with it, that for somebody to feel in the team that nobody expects, or nobody showcases that they know everything, that they know what each and everybody goes through. There are no generalized conversations. This ability to say that, hey, I do not know what you are going through or somebody else is going through, but my experiences are limited to my own only, and I understand that as a limitation. Is a huge thing from a humane angle, and especially in the teams, right? And these are the moments to live for when you're building a culture like this. It's not in the feedback form that how amazing this team is, but it's in these moments that you witness it.
Absolutely.
Right. But so what I'm getting is that this has never been an agenda that we are going to reach this much diversity and we are going to reach this level of these many people. Am I getting this right? This has never been an agenda or number driven in a drive to become this kind of organization.
Well, I don't think we've had any hard numbers necessarily, but I think we definitely have a sense that can we at least be representative of the world in which we exist, right? And I think that, we're slowly edging towards that. I think that the next phase of sort of, evolution for us is really looking at how do I now bring in more leadership, which is empowered, right? A more diverse leadership group, because I think that in itself will, completely change the organization that we are today. When it's not just where we're having people in the room who strongly disagree with something that I say, and are happy to challenge me on that. And right now, of course, I'm happy for anybody to challenge me, but I know that that's not necessarily going to happen each and every time, right? Just because of the sort of the power hierarchies that unfortunately continue to exist, right? So I think that that's one shift that we want to see. How do we bring in people who, right at the leadership level, how do we grow the technical leadership as well, to include more women, more people who are not like us, right? And I think that's something that I think we have direction, but I think that it's going to be learning as well as to how, what structures do we need to build in place, what incentives do we need to create, etc.
No, that's actually quite a key input, right? As long as you're on the path, sometimes that's important enough. You may identify how long you want to walk and how far you want to walk on the way, but at least you've chosen, okay, this is the path that you will want to take, and that itself is it's a key ingredient to building what you are building on right now. For other leaders' sake and other organizations' sake, I would like to understand from both of you, what will be the building blocks, right? Somewhere it had to start, because from intent it does need to manifest into other aspects of the organization. It has to become some form of documents, which we call policies. It has to become processes. It has to become part of key process owners' day-to-day, aspects of their tasks. Sometimes they have to become KRAs and KPIs as well, right?
Yep.
So what were the building blocks? Where did you start? And in different aspects, right? Very, very concrete different aspects, because it's good to say that we are diverse and inclusive. It's good to say that we are a very safe culture to be part of. But where to start if you have not started the journey yet is so important, and you have to approach in a structured manner. It's not a haphazard that today you do one thing and then you see how it manifests, and then 3 months down the line you do something else, right? And you have put together a lot of comprehensive things from your policies and your employee handbook, if I see that, right? So I will not take the space here. I will leave it to both of you to just share how you managed to put it together.
Sure. Maybe I can start just talking about the ideas, Monica, and you can go into some of the specifics.
Sure.
I think, that, like I was talking about, right, it's been a journey for us. It's been a sort of a transition over time. It did not happen overnight. I think this is sort of, one of those, took 3 years, and then, there's sort of inflection points that happen, right? So the most visible, perhaps, changes will be, I don't know, maybe over the last 12 months, but that's been 36 months in the making in some sense, right? I think the first aspect is just to sort of be, well, of course, one was, just, I'm going to ignore us being more aware of what kind of organization we need to be. That journey is that sort of happened.
That's a crucial step, right, Rahul? I'm saying it, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But that's a very crucial step, because when we talk to a lot of, and you are an all-male founders team, right? And it's not the first time that I'm coming across an all-male team. And then you were so right that after some time, every team member starts looking like each other. It's just something that I have seen happening, being part of the startup ecosystem for a long time now. So somewhere you had to break out of that also, and look within and say and take a stand there. right? So I do want you to give due importance to the mindset change in the leadership also, because if that does not happen, nothing else happens. Individuals like Monica, they have done amazing things and wonders, but that cannot happen if the whole team is not on board with it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I
And I need
don't know.
founders to understand this, because
Yeah,
to hire somebody and to have somebody and expect that they will come and do the magic, they will do their magic, but the system has to allow for that magic to happen. So that's why I interrupted you, that don't take the limelight away from the mind shift, the mind shift. It's very crucial
yeah.
ingredient.
I don't think I can necessarily pinpoint, one sort of moment where we said, which was sort of pivotal to us. I think, I think it's been, sort of a convergence of values and beliefs that we had about how the world should exist.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's for I don't know why, but it's almost like those did not, we didn't see how to apply some of those things to a professional context.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, I've been lucky enough to sort of be raised by and be around, feminists my entire life. And I think that that's been an extremely crucial ingredient, right? But then I think that perhaps what the most important thing is then to go on that journey of learning for yourself, right? As a founder. And I think, if you are in a position of responsibility, in an organization, it's extremely important to do that learning or invest, in educating yourself or, your other colleagues, in helping them understand that, hey, the world, as it exists today, does not need to be the way that the world can exist in the future. Right? So I think that it was a learning. It is a learning process, right? I think that I really feel like I'm just on step one at this point in time, and so I can't. I don't know if I can sort of say, hey, this was this sort of crucial tipping point that made me.
With you on this one, it's not an epiphany that one day you wake up and you say that this is what we are going to do, but it's a realization that progresses subconsciously over a period of time.
Absolutely. And there are of course moments that I can sort of look back to, like when we took early team photographs, and then just sometimes when you just put, get those back, printed out. I mean, this is back in the day when you used to print out photographs. And we had like a wall where we stuck them up and whatnot, and suddenly we're looking at them, and you're looking at it, and maybe there's somebody who comes in and who's looking at it with you, and then you realize you're slightly embarrassed about it almost, right? Not at the people, because the people are lovely, the people are great, and
yeah, I know what you're saying.
But as a group, what does that say about you? And what does it say about you in relation to other things in the world that you're looking at and that you're perhaps passionate about, and that people who are important to me have been passionate about for years,
right?
So I think that's that. I don't want to be sort of cliched and talk about yes, hugely important influences have been the fact that I was raised by a feminist mom, etc., etc. Those things are. I think those are hugely key, but those are. I think the work has to be done by me or my colleagues, right? Not you can't wait for somebody else to do that work for you in some sense.
Yeah, cannot happen. With this, I'll jump to Monica and then ask her, Monica, what has been the building blocks, that you would have seen? Because when you walk in and then you see that, okay, what all has been put together so far? Because where should I start the work, right? How has it been? Just walk us through that, please.
Sure. So to kind of carry forward what Rahul was saying, I think the first thing that I think the fundamental building block that I inherited as I came in was the fact that there were a bunch of people who are very aligned on some of these things, right? And not just saying that, and you hear this a lot. You hear a lot of people say that maybe it's the right thing to say that I agree that there ought to be equal, or that there ought to be representation. And that's not at all what I heard in conversations during lunch or, casual conversations with people. I think what one of the first things that happened was the core set of people, and some of them are people who lead teams, some of them are people who hold a lot of influence over other people, and they all come with very similar values in that, there's a strong sort of belief in fairness. There's a bunch of people who would agree and say that, raised by feminists, continue to be raised by feminists around, right? Not necessarily only in the sense of parents, etc. And that is, I think, one of the big ones, that you have people to whom we don't have to explain any of this to, right? So there's no conversation starting from the bottom of, why we are, no. So everybody's already on board, everybody's already giving ideas, right? And like I said, the one instance that I gave where I said, the minute we decided that this is how we ought to do this, everybody is immediately on board, right? So there's no and if there is discomfort, people are saying we'll absorb that discomfort, but we're very clear that all of us are sort of headed in that one direction. The other big one for me, and this is not a very easy to explain building block, but it's a really solid one. Not easy to possibly experience, but just openness and an ability to listen at another level, right? So I think possibly the kind of work that happens is a contributor, and I've thought about this a fair bit, and I don't have answers as to what got people there, but spectacular ability to listen, right? And which means that there are people who just come in and they might have an opinion about what happens next, or what does this mean, or I disagree with you that there is somebody saying that I don't think we are as inclusive. Right? Your tendency is to say that's not true, right? But then the spectacular thing that happened, and is that then a bunch of people get together and another bunch of people get together, and different groups of people are getting together at different points, and just acknowledging that this happened, that it's hurtful, that I am hurt, that somebody should say this about something that I worked so hard to build, and having acknowledged that, right? Then saying, okay, now let's accept that what this person is saying is what they genuinely felt. What do we want to do about that now? Yeah. So and that for me was really, really powerful, right? Just saying that, and it's very, very natural and human when I've taken 2 or 3 steps forward, and then somebody comes and knocks me back and says, hey, you know what, I didn't experience what you're claiming that we should experience. To immediately say I will give you 15 reasons why is a very normal human tendency, but to tamp down on that really hard, and to say, okay, let's acknowledge that this has happened, acknowledge what it's making me feel, and then let's acknowledge the other person's reality as well, was literally, textbook listening abilities. And this happened across the organization with multiple people, and everybody felt like they own it, and that this was something said to them personally, right? So that and therefore and wanting to really say, instead of focusing on who could have said it, right, saying what does that mean for that person? Are we solving it? Are we there? Have we taken a step? Do you think this step worked? Okay, how can we measure it? So
Right.
lots of conversations to get clarity on just that one aspect, and that speaks to a lot of ability to just
That,
truly listen.
that does. But Monica and Rahul, help me understand. Is this how the inclusive policies have been, formed so far? That there are a lot of unique aspects which are there, right? Of course, we keep listening to, we keep talking about drafting policies specifically for women. We keep saying that do this, do that. But are the policies and other aspects which are created for a diverse team as yours? One, I would request, without violating any confidentiality, if you can share some of the key policies that you really believe have been very integral and have been put together, keeping in mind the diverse needs of the team also. And second, uh, are these something that, because of such a participatory approach, is this something that has come out of a discussion, or is this something that has been there, from you thinking that I know what my team needs, or was it the other way around, or a combination?
So I think, one of the starting points has to be safety, sort of just looking at almost policy from, almost like a Maslow's hierarchy sort of way, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you make sure that at the very base we have safety, right? Like basic physiological safety, right? For everybody involved. And the unfortunate reality, which I'm sure that, we all are very aware of, is that is not a given in many workplaces, especially in India today, right? Quite the opposite in some sense. So I think that the first layer that we wanted to look at is, okay, how do we make sure that there's no questions about safety, which right. So one of the people we partnered with very early on was an organization which has helped us look at how do we at least just become compliant with the most basic aspects of the law. And India is actually, at least on paper, quite a progressive state. The reality, of course, is
Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately. But it's really surprising to me, how many organizations don't have those very basic mandated, institutional policies in place, right? Like you have to have a POSH policy, right? At the very least. And that's such a simple
execution,
piece.
right?
Exactly.
You don't have to move mountains to put this in place.
Exactly.
I just wanted to emphasize on that because I don't still understand why companies run away from it. Yeah, sorry.
Absolutely, and I know that you help companies adopt these policies, if I am not mistaken.
No, you're not.
And so I think that was one of the first steps that we sort of embarked on, to say that, okay, while we may debate, okay, what are the further policies, how do we achieve all of those? Let's at least make sure that we get these basics really well put in place. We got and I think that it's really important to pay people whom you're working with, because this is sort of what I call the learning journey, right? You should not be dependent on volunteer work that anybody needs to do, but how do you make sure that you get people who know what they're talking about and who know how to structure these in ways that are nuanced and sensitive to actually put this in place for you and adopt it in a very sort of wholehearted manner, right? They can't be drafted. I remember, right, and I'll share this with you. In the first sort of, I didn't fully understand, the ramifications of the entire POSH, etc., etc. So I said, hey, I'm super pro. And I mean, who is pro sexual harassment, right? That's question number one. So I was like, okay, I am anti-sexual harassment, so I should be on the committee, right? And I was like, it'll be great because I will totally take the person's side whom, of course, which that data shows, etc., etc. But even it's a very so then our consultant came and sat me down and she said, Rahul, I don't think this is a great idea for you to be on the committee, because there's a huge problem, and here's what it is, that you as the head of the organization will bias it if you are on the committee. It needs to be an impartial committee that is not influenced by you in some sense, right? So that, I mean, there's small tiny learning moments, but I think they add up over time here. I think the other thing is, we were lucky, partly by design, partly by accident, to get extremely feminist consultants in the most odd places, right? So for instance, the person who handled all our legal work, so the person who was effectively, acting as our general counsel or whatever, was an extremely, fantastic lawyer, and helped us, with disputes and setting up contracts, etc. But ensured that all the policies that we drafted were also extremely thoughtful and looking at, not just the current status of where we were, but where we wanted to be. Right. So that's been very helpful. Even in mundane matter, or seemingly dry and mundane matters like law or accounting, could you even search for a feminist accountant? Right? What does that even mean? Right? I mean, we're all laughing here, right? The idea of an accountant who brings sort of a different view to the balance sheet. What would that look like?
Right.
That for me is really interesting.
No, that's true actually. And we always say that you don't want somebody to come and vouch for women issues, in every aspect, right? But what is important is anybody who is having a conversation with you, which should be able to have it in an inclusive manner, should be able to give you suggestions in terms of where you are today and where you want to reach somewhere. And and that's the whole point of having somebody sit across or sit beside and talk to you about something, that they are introducing you to something which maybe you have missed out, right? And that's a common thing that happens, right? As an organization, in your important meetings, this is not a parameter that you are talking, that how much have we improved in terms of inclusion or culture. It's not a common habit to include it as part of an agenda. It's usually how many customers have grown, how many active leads we are pursuing, who we were not able to chase, who ran faster than us in terms of our competitors. And as long as those numbers are doing fine, right, and doing more than fine, that remains the only concern, and nobody bothers thinking about the aspects that we are talking about right now, because business is doing fine, so why? And that's the key ingredient, right? How do you make decisions which are inclusive? So
absolutely.
Very crucial. You are actually lucky to have good consultants. I would give you that. That guided you pretty well.
Yeah. And I think then, just looking at the entire life cycle of, not just the employee life cycle, but every aspect of our organization, right? Like, for instance, even when we're designing our office, can we just rethink each of these things, right? And one of the reasons we're called Obvious is because, we sort of wanted to say, can the things that we do seem obvious in hindsight, right? They may not be the most obvious things to do to start off with, but once you look back and you're like, oh, there was no other way that we could have done any of these things, right? So it doesn't just apply to the sort of work that we do, but the way in which we do the work that we do as well, right?
Yeah.
So, so I think Monica will, be able to go into more detail, but hiring, of course, how do we get the kinds of people we want in place, right? And I think that we sort of stay away from, culture fit, right? But look at what we call value fit instead, right? Because, culture is such a loaded term. It often, will mean that, like, there was this one client I worked with, and I remember this extremely vividly. Because the sort of founders, there were 2 or 3 founders, came from a particular part of the country. I walked into the room and I realized that everybody was sort of just a carbon copy of that person, right? From the same region, same, they all enjoyed the same food and, so on and so forth. So I think culture fit is a bit of a dangerous thing to do, right? But if you look for value fit, which is something that we actively search for, right? And some of these values, you may disagree with us on what those values are, and that's absolutely okay. But if you disagree with us on values like that we should be a company that represents the larger world, right? Or that everybody doing the same task should get paid the same, right? That's another of our values around financial inclusion, right? So we have that as an explicit sort of goal where we're saying it doesn't matter whether you have 10 years of experience or you have a year's worth of experience. If you're at sort of the same technical level, why would I pay you differently, right? So those kinds of different, I think, ways of looking at
That's a
inclusion.
decision that has been taken internally. Huh? I'm just like
Yes.
clarifying it that it's the experience and everything is a different thing, but as long as a person is bringing the same kind of value to the team, right? It's and the same kind of task and outputs are being created by them. The salary component or the
Exactly
remains the same. Okay, that's
yeah.
it. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I mean, I know it's not. I mean, I know there's it's sort of controversial in some ways to say that, hey, this should be equal. I know there are some problems around it as well.
No,
but
no,
I think
all inclusive companies are controversial. We start from there. There's no other way to go about it.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that, I see a question as well here around, what do you do around retention? Because it doesn't just stop once you get the right people through the door, but how do you manage to keep them here and not just keep them sort of, shackled in chains, but how do you sort of, one of the things that I remember telling Monica was, how do we build an organization where people want to stay here for 10 years, right? Rather than 2 years, which is sort of the norm in the tech space right now. So how do we make sure that we are able to give sort of intellectual growth, technical growth, financial growth, and career growth, if that's different from financial growth, right? How do we make sure we have all of these and ensure that somebody who comes in and perhaps gives us 10 years of their time,
right.
How do we make sure that that person at the end of those 10 years looks back and is like, okay, this was time well spent. So I think that, Monica, you can go into maybe some detail about both the hiring as well as, some of our retention or progression related pieces.
Oh, yes. Please, Monica, I really do want to hear more about it.
Sure. So I'll start with, I'll kind of take it on from where Rahul left it, which is to say, one of the things we do is to give people a sense of, or think of it in terms of really long periods of time, like 10 years. And so one of the things I do is just take this and kind of, talk about it with absolute new hires and say that, okay, you've been around for 2 months. Now, what would the next 10 years look like? Right. And, and what do we need to do as an organization to make that happen for you, right? So, and break it down into whatever, time periods work for you, but then start planning around it. So what that does for people is, to answer that question on retention is it gives people a sense, maybe they haven't thought about it yet because they've just transitioned into a new job and they're just kind of getting used to how work happens. And suddenly somebody's saying, we want you to be around for the next 10 years and we're going to figure out what does it take to make that happen. Right. And conversations that happen in the meantime, right? Somebody says, hey, we need to change, and this is going back a little to a time when everybody was occupying a physical office, to say that, somebody who is differently abled and needs the doors to be a little different so that, they're able to open it without pain. We'll figure out very immediately how to make that happen, right? Or somebody says, here are challenges that I'm dealing with. And, and we're looking at it from the perspective of, okay, so does this warrant a change in how we function? And if yes, then, can we take it to the larger group and, talk about it and then make those changes immediately and come back and let people know. Right. And that then gives people a sense of, I truly belong here. Right. And if there are times when I don't feel like I belong as much as I did the last month, I have a voice that I can use and talk about it to at least, 4 or 5 people. And, so that I think it sounds simplistic as I'm saying it, but I think that really does cover a fair bit of ground for people to feel, to go back to again something Rahul was saying, to feel safe enough to be able to look at themselves in the long term in the organization and call out if they're not.
No, it gives a huge comfort because purely coming from, an isolated discriminatory perspective, right? A lot of time questions around whether somebody is planning to get married, somebody is planning to have a family, somebody might want to move out, somebody's situation in personal life is about to change. These questions become very, very sensitive because most of the time we do not know how to ask these questions, all because of the social conditioning that we have been part of as a speaker as well as a listener. right? There are a lot of perceptions that are affecting how we have these conversations. And also this known umbrella, concept that if I have shared an aspect of my personal life, I might be discriminated against. Maybe I will not be hired for that role. Maybe I will not be considered for the next promotion or the next important project, and so on and so forth. So from a company's perspective, the minute you say that we need to make a plan for 10 years, and we will, right? It's not a 2 years game for us, it's a 10 years game. Now you tell me that since we are making these plans, what other variables you want us to incorporate? Because we are keeping you, we want you in the team for that long. But help us create that plan. And when you give me that avenue, right, it allows me to come into a space of safe and secure room wherein I know that I already belong. Now I just have to tell them and work with them. Right? Yeah, Rahul.
Yeah, I was just reading the chat while the two of you were speaking, and I see something that I just want to maybe just go into in just a minute or two, right?
Please,
Because this is
please.
something that's come up often.
I was anyway going to pick up these things at the end, but if you already see that we can answer them, that will be wonderful.
Just, I feel like it's very related, right? This idea, somebody's asking about what are retention methods for diversity hires, right, versus non-diversity hires. And I think it's extremely important to just address that briefly, right? To say that that's, the idea of somebody being a diversity hire in itself is very problematic, right? I think the way to do hiring is to ensure that, you're not looking at hiring as, hey, I need, X number of, category A, Y number of category B, and, Z number. That's almost like going vegetable shopping in some sense, right? Which we're not doing. So I think that the way to look at this is that we're trying to build a team. And, one of the references that I look at is actually, in a previous life, I used to work on issues of disability and accessibility, right? And you look at a wheelchair and you look at a ramp, right? Now you assume that, okay, hey, the ramps are only for people who are disabled, right? And okay, now we have this extra expense that we need to include here, et cetera, et cetera. But the way to look at ramps is that, or disability, is that ability is a very brief period of life, right? Yeah. The day you sprain your ankle is the day that you become really thankful for that ramp, right? The day that, you're carrying, 10 heavy shopping bags is the day that you're again thankful for that ramp, right? The day that you're using you're pushing a pram in front of you is the day again that you're thankful for that.
You're carrying a heavy luggage.
Exactly, you're pulling one of those trolleys behind you, right? Yes. So these conditions of diversity and or diversity hires versus non-diversity, they're not binary, right? We are all on a spectrum, and we'll all be at different points on that spectrum at different points in time, right? That's one thing which is extremely important. The other thing is, I think that the way to hire is also not to, a lot of times people look at diversity hiring as reducing standards, right? And I think that's an extremely problematic and dangerous way to look at things, right? The way that you do hiring is ensure that I have a small diagram here, but that, we don't look at, hey, I'm going to reduce standards for anybody, but ensure that, you have enough people whom you're reaching out to. Are you just going to, let's say an IIT, which has, some dismal sex ratio, and then are you being surprised that, you have that same sex ratio represented in your final, your colleagues? Or are you looking at, hey, where do we actually source people from? Are we actively going in and telling people, hey, we, have this position available? I think that all my colleagues who are at Obvious, right, all of them are there because of their technical ability, not because they happen to check a particular box or not. So I think that retention wise, the same, once you start looking at it as everybody is going to experience different things in life. Somebody is going to be a parent. It doesn't matter whether they were childbearing or non-childbearing. They could have adopted somebody. They'll have similar stresses, perhaps some different ones, right? How can you make your policies inclusive for all of these different life stages, right? And I think that that's when you have retention policies that work for everybody.
No, very, very, very key aspect here. How you look at a certain kind of diversity changes everything. From thinking that this is not for me, but this is for somebody else, where I do not belong, and that changes the whole perspective, narrative, the way you look at the cost and other, habit changes associated with these things. And cost plays a huge role here. I don't know if that ever became as a question internally, but there are obvious costs and then there are hidden costs around making decisions like these. How has it been internally? And there are expenses associated with it, right? No matter how small or big these are. Has it ever been a concern, or is this something that the team had already thought through, that this is not even going to be a huge concern for us?
Can you give us some example? I see Monica looking equally
perplexed. Okay.
What example? Can you give us some examples of?
All right. So when we design, let's say for example, simple thing, ramps, simple thing, doors that may require different kind of change from what the normal doors are. Okay, or if you are looking at a washroom which is either gender inclusive, or you're looking at 3 different kind of washrooms, for different genders, to be able to accommodate different genders.
Yeah.
Or you're looking at setting up vending machines, or you're looking at drafting maternity leave policies. There's so much, right? And like I said, there are obvious costs which you can directly calculate with the infrastructure and other things, right?
Yeah.
And there are hidden costs which you were not able to incorporate, and later on you realize that, oh, this also is going to cost me, right? So that's what I meant. I hope I cleared the question.
Absolutely. No, I think that again, if you put these costs in at the time of build, it's very different from retrofitting it, right? And the same is true of architecture, and the same is true of teams, right? Retrofitting diversity onto a team is much harder than building, diverse teams from the ground up. The same way that, we in fact just built out an office, and, putting a ramp in, has a very tiny marginal cost versus putting it in later, right? In a situation where you don't have one and you have to somehow sort of shoehorn it in.
Right.
So I think that there's probably huge value in, if you're a young organization, if you're starting up, if you are an established one, go to somebody who's thought about these things before, rather than having to do them later on, right? So engage with, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but why not think of these things before you make large investments, either in your team, right? It's going to be very difficult if you're a team of 100 people and you suddenly say, hey, listen, I need to now change my team. That's going to be a very traumatic experience for everyone included. So why not build from the ground up in a more inclusive way, right? Rather than the other way around.
No, that's true. Monica, now that my question is clear, I'm asking you also again.
Yeah, I was thinking menstrual leave. Besides that, what else? Yeah, so yeah, there you go.
No, but that's because you're not thinking of them as cost, right? And I'm coming from the perspective where most of the organizations do look at them. I mean, the very fact that you put such a suggestion on the table or on recommendation, it only screams cost and nothing else, right? And it's of course not our perspective. I mean, Ungender does not believe in that. We are hoping that we can get people to understand these are not costs. But I get the confusion because you also as a team have not looked at it as a cost, but looked at it as something which is towards inclusion, right? So there, yeah, I'm glad I explained the question.
I mean, I don't know what the cost is actually, Monica. Maybe you can help me out here. But what is the average cost, maybe not even ours, right, but of the industries, of hiring somebody new? Like, is it in relationship maybe to their monthly salary? Is it roughly 1 month's salary or two or something like that?
Yeah, between I'd say roughly about a month. Yeah.
Month.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like if you're hiring people from scratch all the time, right, versus if you create an organization where you retain people,
Yeah.
right, I think the cost of including something like making sure that the workplace is some place where people do not want to leave, right? So the way that I prefer to look at it is, can the barrier to leave obvious continuously be increased, right? Can people look at it and say, hey, oh, maybe this other organization is going to pay me like and because of the sort of venture capital fueled industry that we're in, there are many times when people can easily say, hey, we'll pay you 3 times the salary that you're getting at Obvious, right? Or in some cases, like I remember there was a time when somebody said, we'll pay you 6 times the salary that you're getting today, right? And I can't compete on salary because we are a self-funded, bootstrapped company, whatever, right? So how can I then say that, hey, what are the other ways in which people can look at Obvious and say, I don't want to go there, I want to stay here?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if I look at it in terms of that, right, I think that the costs balance out. Of course, I haven't done a formal analysis. At some point in time, we'll probably need to, but that's my instinctive sort of back of the envelope math.
No, that's actually true. Yeah, Monica, you were saying something.
And there's a hidden cost of getting people in who need to then be onboarded onto. So if it gets to that, then you get people in and then you onboard them onto the kind of belief systems that you hold true. And then, there's a whole period of time for them to ramp up at various levels of not just work and understanding work, clients, culture, values. And that's a cost. So
no, that's true. That's true. And while you were saying, I was just visualizing that the wall is so high. I mean, a person has to really think that, do I really want to jump? And then you keep building it higher for a person to leave the organization. And you're not doing that by limiting that person. I mean, the person is growing, and that's why somebody is willing to pay them 6 times the salary, right? That means that the person, while staying in the team at Obvious, has obviously evolved and grown, and the talent has more value, and yet you want to keep the bar very high for people to not to be able to jump that wall. And very relatable here, when you can't compete on salaries, you want to make sure, because there's no end to competing with salaries, right? And the culture and the environment that you can create for your teams is the key reason why people will stay or why people will leave. And that has been the focus at your end also. This has been an amazing conversation, and I almost feel sad when the an hour completes and I have to look at the time and I have to say that, okay, this is not just a casual conversation that I'm having in the office, so I have to cut it short. But this has been such an enriching conversation for me, and I can see from the comments also. And there's still so much that I have not covered so far, and I think I will be reaching out to you guys for another set of an hour, to speak to you separately. But any lasting comments, for before we close today? This is for both you, Rahul. One first from you, and then from Monica. For startups which are just building in, right, and where there's this constant limitation of thinking, one very important one is that let's focus on getting the business, and let's focus on getting the products out or the services out. This is something we can deal with later, right? What do you have to say to them, right? And something more in a concrete manner, because otherwise they already know. It's a common sense thing, right, that you have to grow in an inclusive manner, right? What do you have to say to them, with respect to the priority or what is being missed out at this point in time? And then, Monica, I have another question for you, but this one is for Rahul.
Sure. So, one term that we're hearing a lot in the last few months has been Make in India, Make for India, as popularized by our Bangalore boy Danish Seth, go vocal for local, etc. Right?
Yes.
So I think that without commenting on the larger geopolitics of that, I think that the one good thing about that is that we're really looking at India not just as a place to put in copycat products, right? Not just say, hey, something worked there, let's do it here. So we're saying, okay, let's actually do something that makes sense in this environment, in this geography, in this economy.
Right.
Now, if you're building with a group of people whose views are extremely, it's sort of like you're almost hobbling yourself, right? Where you say that, hey, I'm not going to consider other views. I'm not going to bring those views to the table. I'm just going to have a sort of a singularity of thought. Right? And that expresses itself as well in the products that we build or in the way that we build products, right? Like some of the most interesting local startups have actually been ones that, and even when I look at economies like China, which are, at least in our space, they're sort of setting trends rather than following them. You have, different forms of commerce, you have different ways in which you think about digital services, etc. Right? A lot of those have been around understanding different markets, the way that these very the concerns that people have, and how do I address them, right? If I don't have those in place, like I remember, then you have to retrofit. And retrofitting, like I talked about, is always more expensive than building from scratch, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that, for instance, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, you had a huge number of startups which suddenly woke up to the fact that they have to think about women's safety, right? And then had to sort of incorporate a whole bunch of things. There was a huge, of course, the products themselves were poorly built to start with. Then you had to retrofit safety in. And there were costs associated with that. Now, what would have happened if you had had multiple perspectives and had somebody there who said, hey, it's not just, me, Rahul, who is happy to jump into a stranger's car at 11 in the night, but what would have happened? What would that product have looked like if you had somebody else, right, who was like, hang on, these are the reasons why I think we should include these other features, right?
Yeah.
Or what would, the ways in which even, something as mundane as shopping for clothes online, right? Huge opportunity, huge sector. And, I think that some of the companies which have done well are actually companies which have that diversity of thought rather than a more unitary nature, right? So I think that sort of, if I want to compress that, success, is more likely. You increase your chances of being successful with a product if you have a more diverse and inclusive team.
Music to my ears, golden words. No, that's very true, actually. And like you said, there's been enough and more, proofs around us to see in the products that wherever there's a diversity of thought incorporated, you will feel it in the product, because as many people who will be able to relate with it as a user, that, oh, this is for me also, and that me feeling has to be there internally, without you telling me that, hey, Pallavi, you can also be a user of our, product or a service or whatever it is that we have designed.
Yeah. And, just sorry to hog the mic, Monica, but, I'm just reminded of something right now. I don't know how much you follow the startup sector, but right now, one thing that's happening is that every startup is trying to replicate TikTok. Right?
Yes.
And why is it that a Chinese company had to build a product that became hugely popular in rural parts of India? Why did that, understanding of the geography, of the aspirations of people, of their wish to portray their own lives, why did that thinking not come from India? Right? That's something perhaps which people, it's maybe something to think on and reflect about.
No, that's true. And even right now, I've been following some of the companies which are making replicate models of TikTok. And the approach remains the standard, wherein once again, and TikTok was able to actually do a couple of things, right? They were able to not only bring diversity of the regional construct that India is, the social construct that India is, the gender construct. I mean, the LGBTQ community and the queer community I've never seen it flourishing anywhere else. And visibly, right, as it was on TikTok or any other social platform. And now when I see some of the designs, they have again gone back to men and women. And that's we've not understood the DNA that made TikTok a success. And again, back to the same social segment which has access to internet in our own understanding, people like you and me. But that's not what made TikTok successful. That's not what made what it was. And the same back to square one thought process. And I do not know what's the fate of that product. I hope all of them do well, But this is an observation from a perspective where we are, there's no other choice. I think it's not even a goggle that I'm wearing of gender or of diversity, but this is how the retina works now. And there is no other
perhaps way. We can look at inclusion can be a competitive advantage, right?
Yes, and I really and I believe that, and thank you for putting it across like that as one single statement. But that truly is the case, because that increases your chances not just of anything, and it could be in any industry, right, from clothing to fashion to food to entertainment to health, anything that you're to product, right, to anything that you're doing, that does become your competitive advantage. And that's something that is still missing out from the larger boardroom conversations. Monica, I pass on the mic to you. Still waiting. And this was my question that I wanted to frame differently for you. Rahul, is it okay if we take 5 more minutes? Yeah. No, I'm asking both of you, Rahul, Monica, both, because I blocked your time from 10 to, 11 to 12. All right, great. So, Monica, this is my question, that from an organizational perspective, there's a lot of things that companies can do, right? Teams can do. If you have to tell them, let's say 5 items, and it's a lot of work, right? They cannot all go back to their teams now and say that, hey, we are going to create a 10-year plan for you. That sounds simple, but it's not simple and easy at all to do until unless you're willing to walk the whole mile. Don't even start making such claims and promises to your team members.
Yeah.
There's a lot of background and ground level work that you need to
absolutely.
So let's talk about 5 quick, not even hacks, 5 first things that teams need to put together who are about to embark on the journey of inclusion. Let's say they just realize that, hey, inclusion is going to give me that competitive advantage, and it does pay in a long term, in a short term, in a mid term, in every possible manner. What would you suggest those 5 things to be?
So I'd say think of it as, so anything that you start to do new, you start with baby steps, right? So think of nudges that you can give yourselves or your teams. And there's a bunch of, if you just kind of look around online for inclusion nudges, you get 100 of them, and across different areas of focus, right? So for instance, if I'm saying hiring, then, and these are really easy to do. So look at signs. So for example, if you want more women to apply, women tend to apply if they have a feeling that they are 100% or close ready for the job, right? So instead of saying these are the required skills, say that good to have, or I've seen this somewhere and I thought it was fabulously done, which is that when you come in, when you join us, we want you to have these 3 skills. In the next 3 months, we want you to have these more, and 6 months later, these other skills, right? So then that just gives everybody a platform of thinking about it outside of conditioning and bias, right?
Right.
So do not ask about, and this is not just gender, do not ask about where they studied. So for example, we say that don't tell us about your education background or where you worked. We don't need to know that. We just need to understand what you do, right? And we'll evaluate that. So think about how can you gain more control of your own hiring process, instead of saying, oh, a lot of it is really gut feel and blah. say that what can we do to make sure that you're getting in the information that you need about their ability at work, and
Right.
don't worry so much about gender and how many children have they had and how far do they have to come from and will they available in the evenings. So and those are nudges that you as an interviewer, either as a business manager or in people ops, to say, are these questions I can eliminate over time, and what is the work I need to do to eliminate these questions, and what else can I add instead to make sure that I'm getting rich data when I'm doing that conversation with a potential future colleague.
Right.
Again, continue the nudging through, say, onboarding. So can I not ask them, so what language do you speak at home, right? Where are your parents from? What's your what's your hometown? What's your mother tongue? So that's not relevant to the work that you need to do with them, because that will build eventually an intention to say, let's all speak in the same language. Yeah. So what are things that we can do to make sure that the person feels included, not because they're from the same state or region or language or fill in the blanks, but because we believe that they're a good fit for the organization.
True.
So I'd say single answer, inclusion nudges, and then look at, for example, if you're doing a performance down their work tenure with you, not asking again questions like so not necessarily saying you are because of your gender, I'm going to assume that you either are available for more challenging projects or less challenging projects, or kind of question some of those constructs and say, would I ask this of a man, would I ask this of a woman? If I wouldn't, then I don't ask those questions at all. Yeah. So at different stages, building in 2 or 3 key questions to say, if I wouldn't do this for any other subset of human beings that I'm interacting with, then I replace it with something that's a little more neutral.
That's true. That's true. Thank you for keeping it simple. I mean, because these is the things that people can immediately adopt, right? And it's not an easy thing to constantly stay in an introspection mode and say that, will I ask this question to any other gender? And am I asking this question only because of the way this person looks like and the gender that is coming across? The limitation on the time is a fabulous input here, because a lot of time people automatically assume that, oh, it's between 12 to 2, the person must be busy making lunch or with home duties, right? Let us not disturb that person, but we can go ahead and schedule meetings around that time. Or in the evening after 8 o'clock, let's not even invite this person, but the work is still continuing and there are other people who are joining in the conversation. And that automatically becomes a group that is always working and is a workaholic, and the favor that is being extended to the female or the other gender, that favor actually does not work in their favor at all. It's detrimental to the career, to the growth, and the performance appraisal cycles as and when they come in. Questions around language, very, very, very important. To seclude. Of course, for established companies, it's important for them to know what kind of diversity they are dealing with. But my question to you was about while they're building it up, and it's very important that you don't frame questions that will allow that bias to come into picture. Very, very important points. Thank you so much, both of you. I am going to wrap this conversation so that you can continue having a beautiful weekend ahead, building the most unobviously inclusive team that you have been building. And I will look forward to having both of you again as a team, as individuals, to have more conversations around this. Nudges is my favorite word. I'll share more about it in offline mode. But for now, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Everybody,
Thanks,
any question that you have left pending, please feel free to leave it with us, and we will make sure that Rahul and Monica do get to answer them. If not right now, then later.
Great. Thank you all.
The questions. Yes, we will do it.
All right. Thank you for having us, Pallavi. Bye-bye.
Bye, Rahul. Bye, Monica. Take care.
Bye, Pallavi. Bye.